Are you surprised to hear from me?
No. What's going on?
You think I wasn't gonna get at you from the inside? I think you know me a little better than that.
Can't be talking right now.
Well, Diddy is just a working class stiff while he's at Fort Dix.
So when you're at a prison and somebody says, you read any good books lately, Diddy is the answer.
He's the guy to go to because we got video of him at Fort Dix reporting for work.
The audio crackles before the voice fully lands. It sounds compressed, secondhand, captured off another device, not studio clean, not polished, but clear enough to recognize who it is, clear enough to make people pause mid-scroll. In a world used to flawless production and tightly managed messaging, something rough and unfiltered carries a different kind of weight.
With all due respect, my brother, how is your wife doing? I heard she's spending a lot of time on the farm and she loves talking to a pig. I told you when I went on this little road trip, I wasn't going to invite you, but I could change my mind. You understand?
Listen, everything all good. We just can't talk right now.
Now, how about I just talk and you listen? You told me the storm would just come and go if I lay down and stay quiet, but the weather seemed to be getting worse. You know, I could be catching a cold, so I need to make sure you send me some vitamin E and my special case cereal.
Yo, relax. Some things fell through, but everything will be back up soon. Just keep calling your family. You'll be with them soon.
Oh, I'm doing the same thing for Thanksgiving. Make sure you send it straight to the Shade Room and TMZ. Make me look like a good father, and all I need is one juror to be on my side, and this case is over. Make sure them Amazon deliveries get back on schedule, then there won't be no need for us to talk right there.
Just chill out, Puff. I told you I'ma get it done.
You know, I've been thinking about watching a movie lately. It's called Eyes Wide Shut. Have you seen it? It's got a real famous celebrity in there, don't it?
Yeah, Tom Cruise. What's your point?
Is that who it is? Man, I thought it was a different celebrity. I guess it might have been a different movie. You know, I got a lot of movies on my mind sometimes, and I get the actors confused. Some of these actors are so good, they act like they don't even know they're being recorded. Your wife did a few movies, didn't she? And make sure you keep the worm food away from my house while I'm gone. It gets messy. Too many insects start digging around. Remember when I cleaned up the worm food around your house? I kept a sample in case you need it.
Oh, really? Listen, don't push your limits, Puff. I ain't the one to play with. You in there, and I'm out here.
Oh, and don't have another Kit Kat. It's bad for you. She made me gain weight. And get 44 on board again. Make him pull some strings again, or else. Why Oprah staying quiet? Why Ellen moving to another country? Why Leo been in Fiji for months? We already ruined my fucking name. And you know what that means? You gonna...
In the library, where he is making recommendations and handing out different movies and books for his fellow inmates.
I'm really fascinated just by the library
But
itself.
you're seeing him here. This is him reporting to work, taking off his jacket, taking off his scarf, and settling in for a day on the job.
It looks like a public school library.
Yeah.
It's
This was the chapel, and this is the media library in the chapel, which is where Diddy's currently working. He's working in a Life Connections program, which is an 18-month program that helps rehab people, get them closer to spirituality, to charity groups, and with that, it will shorten his sentence. But in this media library, he helps inmates with religious material, rent out movies, that kind of stuff. You see him pushing a
really
cart
interesting.
with a TV on it.
Yeah, I mean, he was in the laundry room when he first got there.
When someone who once commanded arenas, boardrooms, and headlines is suddenly heard speaking from inside a cell, the contrast alone becomes the story. The call was not meant for mass distribution. That is part of why it spread so fast. It feels unedited, unmanaged, real. In an era built on image control, raw audio feels like authenticity, even when context is incomplete. Within minutes, the clip circulates everywhere. Reaction pages replay the same few seconds. Comment sections split into factions. Supporters say the voice sounds steady, composed. Critics say it sounds diminished. Everyone becomes an analyst, dissecting tone, pauses, even breathing patterns. The statement itself is short. It does not need to be long. A single sentence spoken from confinement carries more symbolic force than a polished interview from a penthouse ever could.
There's got to be a promotion.
Yeah.
It feels like a promotion. It feels like maybe he tried the lunchroom and put in a request for something different.
Yeah, it does
I mean,
believe
he is a
it does
media
sound like
mogul.
he used maybe possibly some connections to get a better job.
So here's my question. I mean, that's the story.
Yeah.
My question is this. So Diddy had a certain persona before he got in all this trouble. And now he looks very different, very much older.
Yes.
When he gets out,
Does he?
Yes.
Does he join the Hair Club for Men?
no, the Just for Men Club.
Just
he
for
still
Men?
has hair.
I don't know what it's called. I mean, you tell me. What? I'm sorry.
I mean,
Just
every
for
other
Men
photo,
Club.
this is the first we've seen him without that hat on, and the first we've seen actual footage of his hair. So I feel like he's not proud of it. He wears that hat a lot. I feel
No, we
like-
saw him
Also, it's
without.
cold.
We saw him without a hat.
We've seen him
No?
without it, but also it was cold with the photos we had before he was out in the yard.
Yeah.
Could have been cold, but
So what does he do?
what does he do?
Yeah,
I think he
does
dyes
he or
it.
doesn't he?
I think he
I
does.
mean, that's 2.5 years from now.
I know. I'm just asking.
I don't know what the hell he's gonna do.
I mean,
Guess it depends on what
you've
is-
been public relations adjacent, dealing with all
Right.
sorts of people for
It depends
years.
on what he wants to do when he gets out. Is he going to try to get back into show business? Is he going to be actively involved with artists? Then he might. Depend.
I was just,
don't know.
I don't know. I was just curious about that. So
He's got options.
Eric's right, by the way, when he says that what you get is you're in federal prison, you get 15% off the top for good behavior, and then there are other credits you can get for
your
work
job.
and various other things.
Do you get
so
more-
all of this counts?
Do you get more? Can you take several jobs and get more credit?
I don't know that you can take some. You
Yeah.
work.
Hey,
You
man,
work
how many
20
jobs
hours
you
a
got?
day. I don't. I don't think you can do that.
Sharice from Miami. Diddy looks he looks happy. Why in every clip he's smiling? And you ask what you think he's gonna do when he gets out. He's gonna write a book. He's gonna do a little documentary about his glorious time in the federal penitentiary. He looks like everything's okay.
Yeah, no.
Accusations of wrongdoing. Since Combs' arrest at the Park Hyatt Hotel in Manhattan in September of 2024, there have been several documentaries that have been released about the rapper's rise to the top of the music industry. There have been shows about his trial, but one of the most anticipated retrospectives is from a reportedly years-long rival of Combs, rapper Curtis Jackson, better known as 50 Cent. He is the executive producer of this project, initially teasing it with the title Diddy Do It, but the series was retitled Sean Combs: The Reckoning. It was released on Netflix on December 2nd, and it has skyrocketed to the top of the charts. In fact, 50 Cent posted on his Instagram on Wednesday, #1 on Netflix. If you really like this docuseries, I'll make more, LOL. Now, the documentary's director, Alexandra Stapleton, said in a statement to Billboard, quote, "This isn't just about the story of Sean Combs or the story of Cassie or the story of any of the victims or the allegations against him or the trial. Ultimately, this story is a mirror reflecting us as the public and what we are saying when we put our celebrities on such a high pedestal. I hope this documentary is a wake-up call for how we idolize people and to understand that everybody is a human being." Okay, but here's the thing. Just one day before the series was set to air, Combs' attorneys sent a cease and desist letter to the streaming giant, calling the documentary essentially a hit piece, demanding it be removed. Now we're going to take a closer look at that letter, the arguments that Combs' team is making for all of this to be taken down. But first, I want to talk about some of the biggest, maybe most shocking moments from the series, and then we'll get to the C&D letter. So to do all that, I want to welcome back on Elizabeth Vulai, legal counsel here at Law.
He says he is not broken. He says he is still standing. He says this is not the end. Depending on perspective, those words land very differently. To some, they signal resilience. To others, they sound like denial. In moments like this, interpretation often reveals more about the listener than the speaker. For years, this figure built an empire around command. control of rooms, control of narratives, control of perception. Now, the setting has shifted. The walls behind that voice represent restriction. They represent vulnerability. They represent a loss of the physical dominance that once defined his presence. And that inversion is what makes the audio so powerful. Not just what was said, but where it was said from.
Talking about the case, talking about his civil cases that he's facing. What was your main takeaway?
Yeah, there were a couple of takeaways. I think it was a really sort of original documentary, well put together. There were 4 episodes, usually most of them around an hour long, so it's very thorough. I think the 2 key takeaways were, one, everybody's talking about access to this footage and where it came from. One of the things that I think Diddy had done was he had said he'd hired a videographer. He's someone who films himself, as we've come to know, for most of his career and life. So he had hired this videographer to kind of follow him through this process. I'm not sure if the thinking was, he thought that he might evade the charges and come out with his own documentary afterwards. But just the access of footage that we get, we hear him speaking to his legal team. It's very rare you get an insight into that because, again, that's usually covered under attorney-client privilege. So speaking to his legal team, kind of his own thoughts about what was going on, because also remember, at this point, we really hadn't heard Diddy talk much about this. He had issued an apology over that video of him and Cassandra Ventura in that hotel hallway months before, but he hadn't really given any interviews to the media. He hadn't spoken about it, probably on advice of his attorneys. So getting access to that kind of information was really something that we had never seen before. It's what a lot of people are talking about. And I think the other thing that struck me was just how in depth it went. There's been a lot of documentaries and coverage on the Diddy case. People are covering the allegations, him and Cassandra Ventura. But, one of the episodes goes into his history with Biggie and Tupac and insinuations there, and kind of going a little bit deeper into his upbringing and his career, a little bit further beyond what a lot of other people have covered.
By the way, yeah, we're talking cease and desist letter here, potential legal action, maybe financial repercussions. You might not relate to all this. Let me tell you something that a lot of Americans relate to. Credit card debt. Okay, this is real. This isn't an accident. Every call, every fee, every high interest trap, it is a system designed to keep Americans stuck. The banks profit, the creditors win, but real families lose. Today's sponsor, though, PDS Debt, helps people fight back. So whether it's credit cards or personal loans or medical bills, PDS Debt has customized options to help you pay off debt faster. And in fact, there's no minimum credit score required. Plus, they're A+ rated by the Better Business Bureau. The system can make you feel like you're drowning financially, which is why I want you all to find solutions to your debt. It is your money, it's your future. Do not let the system decide for you. You are 30 seconds away from being debt-free. Get your free assessment and find the best option for you right now at pdsdebt.com/sidebar. That's pdsdebt.com/sidebar, pdsdebt.com/sidebar. Yeah, and it wasn't even really about the trial, maybe because that was oversaturated, maybe because everybody was watching our coverage here on Law and Crime about the trial. And by the way, found out that my voice and Elizabeth Milner's voice, Queen Elizabeth, were both in the documentary, I think in like episode 4 when it was going into the trial or in his arrest. It was interesting. I'll talk more. I am curious about what you think of that footage, and we'll talk about how it factors into the cease and desist letter. First of all, no attorney-client privilege, because if he is actively, deliberately, knowingly recording that, the privilege, anything that he says to his attorney, that's waived, right?
Correct. So that was one of the first thoughts I had is, he's speaking to Mark Agnifilo, who's the lead attorney on his legal team. They're talking about, overall case strategy, the indictment that they expect to come down. My first thought was, we've never seen this before. This must be privileged. But again, you forget there's a videographer in the room. So when you think about attorney-client communications, yes, that's usually covered under privilege. But if you have a third party that you're inviting into those communications, that's not necessary, unless the person is an interpreter or maybe an accountant. If you have a videographer that's there not for legal reasons, you can make that argument that, the privilege is waived.
And by the way, that conversation, the actual context of it, it's something that we always were thinking was going on.
Control. That is the theme running underneath the clip. Even from confinement, the voice reaches for it. The attempt to project steadiness from a place defined by restriction is what makes the moment so compelling. It is not only about the words, it is about the setting. A prison call carries built-in symbolism. Media outlets handle it carefully, leaning on cautious phrasing while still recognizing the spectacle. A recorded call from someone who once operated at the highest levels of influence is bound to dominate headlines. Supporters hear discipline in his tone. They argue that composure under pressure signals durability. To them, the voice suggests that whatever has happened legally, the larger legacy remains intact. Critics hear something different. They describe the confidence as performative, the pauses as strain rather than strategy. In moments like this, interpretation becomes a reflection of prior belief. Power meeting limitation creates a narrative vacuum, and people rush to fill it.
Behind the scenes, there was a sense of frustration about how the media and social media was portraying Diddy and the narrative, and he was like, we're losing. And he was getting a bit combative with Mark Agnifilo about what was going on. And he's like, look, I did everything. You said I'm like basically an ideal client, a star client. I did everything you want. I came to New York. And like he was just waiting to see if he would be arrested and indicted. And that was like a bit of tension there, which it's a rare behind the scenes glimpse of what those conversations and what those moments are between an accused and their defense attorney before the hammer drops.
Yes, very rare. And that's, I think, one of the things that struck me and what a lot of people are talking about. Again, you don't usually get a window into that. I think the push and pull was, in the conversation, Mark Agnifilo had said, look, an indictment hasn't been dropped yet. The indictment came down September 16th of last year. And Mark Agnifilo had said it's mid-September at that point. So I think the indictment was really just about to drop. So at that point, you have Diddy who, he said, look, I've come to New York. I've basically surrendered. His legal team is taking the position you have to cooperate and kind of show that you're here ready to take this head on. But then Diddy's sort of saying, we need to get someone out there on the comms front, as somebody who's, in his words, has dealt with the dirty side of media and propaganda. So I think what Diddy was trying to say was, there's nothing to be done legally on the criminal front because no indictment had been dropped yet. But in the court of public opinion, it seemed like he wanted to take a more aggressive approach to put a certain message out there. And his attorney seemed to kind of think the opposite.
And just to be clear, so the documentary begins with this shot of Combs in his hotel room in New York. This is, I believe, just 6 days before his arrest last year. Turns out Combs had hired this videographer to film him while he's in New York. The documentary's producers got their hands on this footage, and he's talking on speakerphone with Mark Agnifilo, this high-powered attorney, who is, by the way, just one of several lawyers he would have on his multi-person legal team, and says that more needs to be done to help his public image, that it appeared to him like they were losing. And remember, again, this is before he was officially indicted and arrested. Now, apparently he knew it was coming. He'd been under investigation for months at this point. In a statement to NBC News, Combs' publicist, Judah Engelmeyer, said, quote, "The footage was created for an entirely different purpose under an arrangement that was never completed, and no rights were ever transferred to Netflix. A payment dispute between outside parties does not create permission for Netflix to use unlicensed private material. None of this footage came from Mr. Combs or his team, and its inclusion raises serious questions about how it was obtained and why Netflix chose to use it." Now, Elizabeth, we're going to talk more about what Combs' legal team has to say in this cease and desist letter, but what's your reaction to that?
Yeah, it's hard to say because there's still such a big question mark in the air because, Curtis Jackson, aka 50 Cent, is one of the executive producers on this series. Him, the director, Netflix in general, is not saying where they got this footage, only that it was obtained legally. Diddy's side is saying this is coming from a videographer I hired. I know we'll get into the cease and desist. One of the arguments they make is, this is subject to NDAs or agreements that the videographer had signed with Diddy because he was, employed by Diddy, and therefore the footage belongs to Diddy. That's the argument that they're making. So it's difficult to say because Netflix is not really saying how or where they got this footage from. One of the things that they did say was that it was sent to them legally. So, if you have the videographer sending the footage to them physically, that would be fine, but it does leave a question mark about where the legal rights are coming from. The only really avenue I see is if there's some way that the videographer had obtained a license for the footage, then the videographer would have the ability to take that license and then transfer the footage over to Netflix. But if the footage belongs to Diddy, then that's a little bit tough.
That's a good point. Okay, let's keep that in mind. We'll talk about that in a minute. I do want to talk about the content of the series. So the series featured interviews with many people who were at one point in Combs' inner circle. This includes Aubrey O'Day.
In the call, he reportedly references loyalty. He speaks about who has stayed close and who has not wavered. That part resonates because Crisis tends to clarify alliances. No names are stated publicly in this narrative, but listeners claim to detect subtle signals. Theories multiply. Some speculate about potential witnesses. Others wonder who may distance themselves to protect their own reputations. The speculation moves faster than the facts. Within hours, side-by-side clips circulate. Past speeches about dominance and ownership are placed next to audio recorded behind walls. The contrast writes its own storyline. Then comes the line that shifts everything. He suggests that when the time is right, he will expose everything. It is brief but sharp. That single suggestion ignites the next wave.
It's a member of the girl group Danity Kane, which was created on Combs' MTV show Making the Band. She has since accused Combs of basically grooming her, firing her for refusing to give in to his alleged sexual advances. We have Albie Shore, singer, songwriter, former record executive, dated Kim Porter before she was in a relationship with Combs. There's Roger Bonds, one of Combs' apparent former bodyguards, who's gone on the record to say that he knew Combs was allegedly physically violent with his then-girlfriend, Cassie. At one point in his interview with the documentary's producers, he said of Combs, "When I first met him, I liked him as a person because I didn't know him." You have Kalina Harper, who is part of Combs' group Diddy Dirty Money, released a statement supporting him after the third member of that group, Dawn Richard, had filed a lawsuit against Combs. And in the documentary, Combs can be heard calling Harper to complain about the lawsuit, asking her to put out a statement. A former friend, business partner of Combs who appears throughout the documentary is Kirk Burroughs, the co-founder of Bad Boy Records. The two apparently worked very closely together for years. Burroughs served as the general manager, handling the rapidly growing company's funds. And according to Burroughs, when they started Bad Boy, Burroughs was given a 25% stake in the company, with the other 75% being in Combs' mother's name, Janice Combs' name. And we're gonna get more into why Burroughs alleges it was set up that way in just a second. But according to Burroughs, Combs allegedly threatened him in 1996 with a baseball bat, forcing him to sign over his stake. So Burroughs apparently sued in 2003. The lawsuit was thrown out because too much time had passed since the alleged incident. And more recently, Burroughs sued Janice Combs for fraud, Combs himself for sexual harassment. This is according to a report from Cinemaholic. And those appear to be ongoing, by the way. Now, Burroughs claims that he was blacklisted from the entertainment industry, led to periods of homelessness. He's since re-entered the music industry, starting Pop Life Entertainment in 2018. This is also per Cinemaholic. So Elizabeth, there's a lot here, but what did you make of the Burroughs part where he was proving, you know, this kind of relationship that he had, and that he was coerced into giving up his stake in what would become a multi-million-dollar company? I mean, I guess the allegation is basically that Diddy ruined his life.
Yeah, that was there are a lot of difficult moments in the documentary. I watched all 4 episodes as mentioned, and that was a tough one. And again, information that we hadn't really seen before in prior documentaries. So, you know, this is someone who had co-founded Bad Boy Entertainment with him. A lot of the things he was saying seemed to kind of run along the theme that I think prosecutors were trying to push in the actual case, was that in the prosecutor's view, this is somebody who will do anything to basically get what he wants. He doesn't really care what effects or damage that causes to other people. And it's in different ways, right? Whether it's in the context of alleged abuse, business disputes, you know, alleged sexual assaults, things that have been alleged in the civil lawsuits against him. And I think with Burroughs, it was really, you know, kind of seemed to strike that theme as well, because he's saying, you know, he had forced me out of the stake of my company. You know, he had to deal with things like homelessness, while in the 2000s and 2010s, Diddy was really prospering, you know, music, business, fashion. And one of the things that he had said, what he alleged in the documentary, and again, this is an allegation from him, was that the name Bad Boy Entertainment, you know, Combs's name was not.
Exposure implies secrets. Secrets imply other people. And once others enter the equation, the story expands beyond one individual. Suddenly, the focus turns outward. Who could he be referring to? Is it a warning? A promise? Frustration spilling over? The ambiguity keeps the conversation alive. Within a day, the clip spreads widely, not because of length, but because of tension. It captures the spectacle of influence confined. In this fictional scenario, his legal team responds with measured language. They remind the public that recorded calls can be edited and stripped of context. they stop short of confirming details. But online momentum rarely slows for nuance. Analysts continue breaking down tone and phrasing, while the broader narrative grows larger than the audio itself.
Involved in that on the corporate side. And one of the things he's saying is the reason for that was to avoid having to pay any liability from, the devastating basketball game that had happened in the early 90s, where he was the subject of wrongful death lawsuits because of the multiple deaths that had occurred as a result of that basketball game that Diddy was behind organizing. So that was really, surprising to hear.
Yeah, that was a big allegation, because the families of the victims killed in that stampede, it was horrible. We're talking about December 28th, 1991. Combs, fellow rapper Heavy D, they hosted this charity basketball game. The game took place at the gymnasium of the City College of New York. And according to the New York Daily News, before the basketball game started, people who weren't let inside, they broke a window, swarmed toward the entrance of the gym, all went down a staircase. The doors at the bottom of those stairs opened towards the stairs, not towards the gym. So once a crowd got down there, they couldn't get the doors open and people started being crushed. 9 people died, dozens of others were injured. And there were no criminal charges that were ever filed against anyone for the stampede, but multiple families and injured victims, they filed lawsuits. And that's just one part, right? So I actually wanted to get into this too. The docuseries devoted a lot of time to the killings of Tupac Shakur and Biggie Smalls, and Combs' alleged connections to this, to both men, obviously knew both of them. So there have been accusations made in the past that Combs' involvement in the East Coast, West Coast rap feud of the 90s, there was more than just talk, that it could have involved things like hit orders. Now, to be clear, these are allegations. There's no evidence to suggest this. This series, though, it emphasizes that he has never been investigated or charged regarding their assassinations. Nevertheless, several interviewees during this documentary expressed that Combs' actions seem suspicious in hindsight. The documentary plays part of an interview that Dwayne Keefe D. Davis did with investigators looking into Tupac's murder, which had become a cold case. And on the tapes, Keefe D. says that Combs agreed to pay him if he killed Tupac and also rival record label head Suge Knight. Now, Davis allegedly admitted that his nephew Orlando Anderson was the one who shot the men, killing Tupac, injuring Knight. But Davis says Combs never came through with any payment. And by the way, Davis is currently awaiting trial for Tupac's murder in Las Vegas. Combs has always denied any involvement in the assassination. That was a big moment, I would say. Elizabeth, that was a big part of this. I didn't know that was going to be a part of this documentary.
I was really surprised as well. So I believe it's the second episode that dedicates a lot of time to it. And like you said, there have been insinuations in the past. They played video clips of, Sean Combs being asked in prior interviews in the 90s and 2000s, do you know, who killed these men? Did you have any involvement? He's always denied it, to be clear. These are just allegations. But yeah, that was really, really shocking. And one of the sort of a little bit more of the backstory behind his alleged involvement with Tupac was that a lot of the interviewees in the documentary were saying that Biggie, who was signed with Bad Boy and who was really close with Diddy at the time, was starting to form a friendship with Tupac, and they were getting really close. And a lot of the interviewees were saying, in their view, Diddy didn't really appreciate that. So I think a lot of the themes that you see again is coming up as him sort of wanting and needing to be the number one person in people's lives, whether it was personal, business. And it's really interesting because you see a lot of the themes that, again, the prosecution was trying to push forward that we saw in his personal life with Cassandra Ventura, always needing to be number one, not necessarily regarding the damages he's doing to other people.
People start dissecting everything. The background noise, the echo, the timing between words. They try to confirm where it was recorded, whether it was altered, whether the tone signals strategy or impulse. If it was calculated, then it is a move to retain influence despite confinement. If it was spontaneous, then it is emotion slipping through a controlled environment. Either explanation keeps the clip alive. Even the mechanics of a prison phone system become part of the story. Calls are monitored, recorded, limited. Every sentence carries consequence, so when someone speaks boldly under those conditions, it sparks debate. That choice alone shapes perception, and perception shapes legacy. Right now, that legacy feels suspended. The voice travels far beyond the walls it came from. Supporters hear resolve, critics hear unraveling, casual observers hear spectacle. What may have been intended for one person lands in front of millions. That is the nature of the digital era. Recorded moments do not stay contained, especially when they carry defiance. The deeper question is not whether the call is real within this narrative. It is what the moment represents. A figure once associated with power and command now speaking from restriction, still attempting to project reach. A smaller room, a larger echo. That contrast resonates because it feels human. Stripped of amplification and stagecraft, even the most dominant personalities sound different. Breathing becomes audible. Pauses stretch longer. Words are chosen more carefully. The aftermath does not quiet the storm, it fuels it. Now there is audio attached to speculation, tone layered onto rumor, a promise of future revelations hanging in the air. Whether those revelations ever materialize is uncertain, but anticipation alone keeps attention fixed. The empire may be paused, the doors may be closed, but the narrative continues moving. And that single crackling call ensures that, even in confinement, the figure remains central to the conversation. Not under lights, not behind a podium. Just a voice traveling through a monitored line, replayed again and again long after the call itself has ended.